the Environment Minister decides to take a nice trip to the UAE to talk about reducing emissions. It's interesting that he can sit there, lecture others about trying to live their lives, and pointing his finger at others who are trying to maybe take a vacation if they work all year round. Feed their families, for crying out loud. Nowadays, food bank usage through the roof, expenses through the roof, rent, mortgage through the roof. And then the minister has the audacity to look at others and say, how dare you get on that plane? But he bemoans the wealth of others for maybe creating a job through a small business or two, creating opportunity in their community, and then tells them they can't see the fruits of their labor. But he'll take all that life has to offer. I bet you that Environment Minister ate at the best restaurants, stayed at the finest hotels. And now we have 133 Ontario chiefs taking the government to court because that government would not sit at the table, negotiate with this government on a way forward. Something that should be common sense to this government. The fact that they have to get to the point where these communities have to use money better spent for providing services for their people. Now they have to use it to take to court only to try and stop the misery this government is inflicting. Now, in April of 2022, the Auditor General, in what can be called by many a scathing report on carbon pricing, found that Indigenous groups were disproportionately burdened by the Liberal carbon tax. In section 5.60, the report states, Indigenous groups and small and medium-sized enterprises were still disproportionately burdened. The Auditor General also found that Environment and Climate Change Canada had not established any criteria for their assessment of provincial and territorial systems in the federal benchmark to consider the potential disproportionate burden of carbon pricing for all jurisdictions. And unfortunately, in February of this year, in a press release, and I quote, "The reality in First Nations communities is poverty-stricken conditions, along with substantially higher costs for all goods and services in rural and remote communities." I go on to quote, "The fuel charge program has added a costly burden on First Nations who experience far greater poverty and substandard housing and infrastructure than the average Canadian as a result of colonialism. The fuel charge cost to First Nation citizens amounts to another cash grab for Canada, removing several $million a year from those people who are least responsible for the climate crisis." That pretty much says it all, Speaker, and I know my time is running short. It's a shame because I have a lot more to say. But this hurt is real for First Nations communities. There's not more money in their pockets because of this government. The housing crisis has not gone away. We see opportunities left and passed by this government. We had leaders from Germany and Japan come to this government saying, we would like to buy your energy. And who would benefit from that energy in a lot of cases? First Nations communities, through jobs, through opportunity, investment, equity stake. And this government just fluffed off the Chancellor of Germany, fluffed off the Prime Minister of Japan. Nope, you can go buy your energy somewhere else. This would have provided some much needed relief for Indigenous communities. But this government, like the carbon tax, they ignore the needs, the wishes, the desires of those First Nations communities. So in our motion, Speaker, we are calling for the carbon tax to be taken off families, for farmers, and for First Nations. Thank you, Speaker.
Question.